A big hello and a very warm welcome to Brand Equity with me, Sonali Krishna. Today on the show, we have the country's largest car maker, Maruti Suzuki. It's been a rough and rocky terrain for the automobile manufacturers in the country. First COVID, then the extreme shortage of semiconductors, inflation, plus a looming threat of a possible slowdown of the economy. Despite this, Maruti has managed to do rather well for itself, especially in Q3. The automaker reported a rise of 132% year-on-year in standalone net profit at Rs 2,351 crores in Q3 of FY23. Not just that, the net sales of the company rose by 25% year-on-year at Rs 27,849 crores, while their revenue from operations have jumped by 25% year-on-year at Rs 29,044 crores. What's the automaker doing right? And what's in the offing for 2023? Well, Maruti Suzuki India's Executive Officer, Suresh Akella, joins me right here on Brand Equity to give me a sense of the sector and, of course, what's brewing at Maruti. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Akella, once again to join me right here on Brand Equity. Truly a pleasure.
Hi, Sonali, and thank you for having me on your show.
Well, life has come back to normal for all of us, Ram. I'm sure for most of you, you guys were working through the lockdown. For us, life is suddenly back with a bang. How are you viewing this comeback in 2023 if you juxtapose what's happening around you with 2019?
Yeah, so if you go back to 19, I think that's always a pleasure to think of 2018-19. Which has been the highest, which was the highest ever sales volume for the automobile industry across sectors, passenger vehicles, two-wheelers, commercial vehicles, as well as three-wheelers. Since then, of course, we've had these two consecutive years of COVID-related, disruptions, lockdowns here and there. After that, I think 1 full year of no major such lockdowns or disruptions, so that makes our and that's quite a good thing. And especially in the passenger vehicle segment, we are looking at a year, closing the year in this March as being the highest ever, crossing the 2018-19 numbers. So it's been a good run this year so far.
Right. So that's actually quite positive. But, a couple of things I want to chat with you about in terms of obstacles, automobile makers like yourselves have faced. What is the status report in terms of, that semiconductor shortage that all of you faced, and it was, such a rocky time given the pent-up demand. Has that somewhat been, eased, and are automakers such as yourselves being able to deliver to that demand that had kind of, built up?
Yeah, so I think it's a mixed bag when it comes to the semiconductors. I think last year, 2021-22 was very, very bad in terms of the availability of semiconductors. Since then, I think there's been a good improvement in terms of the availability of semiconductors. Like I said, at 3.85 plus kind of million vehicles sold in, expected to be sold in this financial year, and the highest ever. The situation definitely has improved. But if you ask me, are we completely out of it? I think we still, have some issues, still continuing. The uncertainty remains in terms of availability, and the buffers and those stocks in between in the entire chain seems to have completely disappeared. So any kind of a incident here or there leads to an immediate. So the uncertainty definitely continues, and there's still shortage of semiconductors. Model to model, segment to segment varies, but then it still you're not completely out of it.
Well, I guess then the tough times continue. But tell me, we've seen a super performance by Maruti, especially in Q3. There seems to be, a notable surge, especially, in terms of volumes. What's happening? Tell me a little bit about the consumer sentiment and, of course, your own initiatives at Maruti to ensure that this robust demand continues and doesn't ease off.
Yeah, so there are a few things we must take from, the COVID and post-COVID. There is definitely a consumer preference that has shifted more towards personal mobility, and that seems to be driving the demand and continues to drive that kind of a demand for us. And just to give you a few figures, the automobile industry in any quarter has, I can remember, there are just two instances where it crossed a volume of 900,000. Once in Q4 of 2021 and again in Q4 of 21-22. But if you look at this financial year, every quarter has had a volume of more than 900,000 for the industry in terms of sales. In fact, Q2 this year, in fact, had a million plus kind of sale in one quarter, which is a record of sorts. Even this Q4 seems to be going quite well. So likely that the numbers will be closer to that million. And for the full financial year, we are expecting to close at about 3.85 million, which is substantially higher than the previous high of 18-19, which was about 3.38 million. So, one is the personal mobility and the preference, which has definitely kind of shaped the kind of demand that we see.
Right. So if I had to ask you in terms of your personal confidence levels for 2023 in terms of the outlook and the task cut out for Maruti and you, how would you say the year looks?
Okay, so the one thing is that we had these 2 years of COVID disruptions, and after that we're seeing a good jump in sales this year. The industry is likely to have about 26% kind of growth in this year, leaving us with that 3.85 plus kind of million volumes. And after having seen that kind of a growth, and we still have a good order book pending, the industry seems to have about 800,000 plus kind of pending bookings. We ourselves are running at about more than 400,000 pending bookings. So on that side, on the demand side, seems to be quite strong. However, we're also seeing a lot of other factors, the headwinds in terms of global headwinds, also inflation or interest rates going up and so on. So we'll have to see how that shapes up. The semiconductor shortages, like I said, are still not behind us completely.
Sure.
So that could have some impact on the supply side of it. And most of the projections seem to be hinting at a growth rate of about 6 to 7% in the next financial year over this kind of. So after that, that kind of surge that we saw in, normalization, I would say, that we saw in 2022-23, I think it's going to be a positive, normalized growth of 6 to 7% going forward. So we're looking forward to that with optimistic, but at the same time cautious. So, for Maruti Suzuki particularly, I think it is important to note that we've been very strong traditionally in terms of our market shares in the hatch and sedan space. In the hatch, for example, we have over 71% market share. In the sedans, we have about 40%. In the MPVs, we have close to 50% market share. In the vans, we have almost 95% market share. The one area which where we had very low market share was the SUV space, and which actually has been also growing. There's also been a shift in customer preference more towards the SUV-ish body shape. And so that has the contribution of SUVs, for example, has sharply increased over the last 4-5 years, from about 25-30% to now 42% this year. So we are quite excited in terms of our strengthening our position in the SUV space.
Sure.
We have the Grand Vitara and the Brezza. We also just recently unveiled the two new SUVs. So we'll have four, including the Fronx and the Jimny.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to actually strengthening our hold on the SUV market as well. So we're looking quite positively towards the year 23-24, especially in this space.
Mr. Akella, I'm glad you brought this up, and I really want you to, explain to me and my audience what is the customer behavior currently when one looks at different categories of automobiles. And I know that there is a concerted effort by Maruti to ensure that your share in the SUV market is heightened. In fact, it has been stated that you're looking to get your overall market share to about 50%. These are stated missions that the company is looking at. But give me a sense in terms of, if you look at India, and what are the trends you're seeing in terms of consumer preferences across, of course, SECs?
Yeah, so one thing which is a stark thing to notice is this shifting preference towards the SUVs, like I mentioned earlier. So say about 5 years ago, the SUV contribution was roughly just about 20%.
Sure.
And today it's doubled to about 42%. At the same time, I think the hatchback segment, which was about contributing to about almost 50% of the industry, is now down to 35%. Sedans used to be contributing about 20%, and now at about 10-odd%. The MPVs have been stable though, at about 9 to 10%, about 9%. And the vans have come down, but still about 3.5 to 4%. So predominantly, if you see, there is definitely a shift towards the SUV kind of a body shape. In terms of the high seating and the ingress, egress, and the body shape itself. So that trend, I think, seems to be continuing globally as well, and similarly in India also. And so that's one space. If you look at Maruti's market share, other than SUVs, we are quite healthy at about 64%. But when it comes to the SUVs, where we're at about 11-odd%, 12%, which brings down the market share to about 40%.
Absolutely.
So very clearly, our task is cut out in terms of the SUVs and how we strengthen that, and hence all the product interventions that you're seeing in the last few months have also been in that space. So we're looking forward to that.
Mr. Akella, what is currently happening with the electric vehicles? So much is being talked about it. We even have some new cab services which are completely electric. But what's really happening in that space? Are consumers really willing to take that jump and get into buy an electric vehicle? Give me a sense of what's happening there.
Yeah, so electric vehicles is a much talked about subject. I think it's quite a exciting space to continuously watch over the next few years.
Sure.
It's about the carbon neutrality when we talk about electric vehicles. We've seen some models which have been introduced in this space, and the volumes have been growing. But at the same time, I think overall volumes, the contribution is roughly 1.5% to the overall industry. Of course, we still have a long way to go in terms of the electric vehicles catching pace, which I'm sure should start seeing those jumps very very soon in the few years from now onwards. We also have to look at how the ecosystem builds, and we have to work towards actually building that ecosystem in terms of charging infrastructure and so on and so forth. The cost of batteries and the price of the vehicle, affordability itself is one concern which we need to look at. So we at Maruti Suzuki, and Suzuki recently also announced that we would be coming up with our EVs. We plan to launch about 6 models in the EV space by 2030. The first one starting about in the financial year 2024-25. In fact, in the recently concluded Auto Expo, we also showcased our concept EVX, which is an electric vehicle. While we are speaking about EVs, we are also cognizant of the fact that we need to work towards carbon neutrality and reducing emissions and so on. So there are certain objectives, including the import bill in terms of crude oil imports. So we are actually taking a technology agnostic approach here, not just looking at EVs, even if EVs contribute to say 20% or so, 5-10 years down the line, we'll still have a large number of ICE vehicles still on the road. So we're looking at how to reduce emissions there.
Mr. Akella, between you and me, I have to say this to you. I mean, every company and the government and, all of us seem to claim that we all want to, focus on reducing the carbon footprint individually, as corporates, as governments. Globally, one talks about this. But I find it quite hypocritical. I mean, here I'm just having a conversation with you. This is about generally humankind, because we at one end we're talking about carbon emission reduction, but I don't know about Delhi, Mr. Akella, but Bombay is in a complete mess, and because of COVID, people have bought the insecurity that COVID gave you. People have bought a lot more cars and two-wheelers. The roads are congested. I don't think our carbon emission has been as high as it is today. Plus, you have the likes of Swiggy, Zomato, Dunzo, Amazon, who are just, congesting the road. And I'm equally to blame because I'm also ordering. So as a consumer and as a citizen of the world, I'm equally contributing to this because I'm also getting things at my fingertips. It's making us all quite lazy. So do you think the world is really concerned about carbon emission, or do you think, this is required to be said by almost every stakeholder? I mean, you talk about Davos, they have these big sessions there, but somehow I feel it is more, something that needs to be ticked off and spoken about than we actually as citizens of the world doing something. What do you say?
I'm curious to know your perspective.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That the roads are congested. You see a lot more of vehicles on the road, and so on. But my take is that somehow, this India as a country, our car penetrations are very, very low as compared to most of the other countries.
But do cities have the capacity? Right now, every city seems to be bursting from the seams.
Exactly. So the point I'm making is that somehow we seem to be playing this catch-up game in terms of infrastructure, catching up with the aspirations of people. Of course, in the last few years, we've seen good improvement in infrastructure. We still have a long way to go. At the same time, there are aspirations and dreams of people which we cannot ignore. I mean, people will love to. And more importantly, even if we talk about public transport systems and various other alternatives to personal mobility, I think we're still playing that catch-up game.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
somewhere we'll have to balance out all these three. As a developing country, which we want to very shortly become a developed nation, I think the people and their aspirations, their income levels, and their and like we say. Maruti says that we want to provide joy of mobility to millions of Indians. So having and with the kind of current, the levels of motorization that we have in the country, I think we still have a long way to go. So it's something where we'll have to look at both infrastructure, public transport, in a holistic manner rather than looking at just one thing at a time.
Sure. Mr. Akella, I'm also curious to know, in the post-COVID era, are you seeing any notable changes in terms of how media is being consumed, and hence, as a matter of that, how media spends are being impacted? Or have we gone back to our usual ways? Because all of us saw some aberrations when we were stuck at home and we had nothing better to do. So yeah, we were all watching lots of OTT platforms, and of course TV had spiked and all of that, digital had spiked. But have things normalized? Have we gone back to our old habits?
Okay, so yes, you're absolutely right that during the COVID period, there was a disruption to most of the traditional media. And there was a lot more of adoption of I would say the trends were there, but then the trend got accelerated in terms of adopting digital media and digital modes of transactions and so on. So obviously during the COVID periods, the media spends also had to change. We had to go slow on probably the print and the cinema and so out of home and so on. And then so our digital spends, for example, which were about 10%, have gone up to 30%. But now after some normalization, we're going back into some amount of print and out of home cinema and so on. But nevertheless, the spend on digital continues to be robust, because I think that has changed for sure, and the consumption patterns have also moved towards the digital. Of course, TV continues for us to be the highest in terms of our spends.
Okay.
And, yeah.
So net, you're saying people have gone back to their old ways, right? Because if you remember, during COVID, there were these major reports forecasting the future about, the old trends being put to bed, new trends taking over the world, work from home, work from anywhere, all those big spiels globally heard from leaders. But as we can see, the moment things normalize, we're all been called back to work. So clearly not much has changed. Having said that, Mr. Akella, I also want to talk to you about, the fact that today we have, in terms of digital media spends, we have a duopoly between, Meta and Google, and of course, the other big behemoths are catching up, and we're seeing the forecasts of the media spends. If you look at the Pitch report, or you look at the Group M report, everybody talks about this great acceleration in digital spends. Not only this year, but even next year, the forecast seems very heavy. As one of the leading marketers of the country, my question to you, as I ask every marketer who is a very big marketer, is when will you demand transparency from the digital ecosystem? They continue to remain in their walled gardens, and they seem to not really be under any pressure to have a neutral metric. Unlike other media, be it TV, be it print, or all of us are forced to have a common metric. But I don't know why, and globally I know many global marketers, the most vocal being P&G, putting enough pressure to say, listen, we need to have a common metric, and you open your walled gardens to us for transparency. Is it something that leading marketers like yourselves, along with others, are putting pressure on the digital ecosystem?
So you're right. I think this has been one area of discussion across almost all marketers. So we continue to look at ways of kind of having the transparent measurement. At the same time, I think we are also trying to find alternate ways of measuring our spends and the kind of outcomes that we're getting out of those. So there are tools like DAR, which we kind of adopt to look at how things are happening. We also have brand lift and other studies to check and look at the KPIs and the movement in KPIs in terms of how the brands have done in terms of this one.
Sure.
We also look at actually the end result, which is the number of leads that we generate out of that. And here I'd like to share with you, so we use digital medium for across the marketing funnel, whether it is top of the funnel in terms of awareness and or the consideration, and also bottom of the funnel, which is actually the capturing the leads and so on. So we have implemented over the last few years one of the largest programs for our dealers and our regional offices in the sales sales end, which we call the hyperlocal program, where the dealers actually kind of spend in the digital space. They have assets, including a website, a Google My Business page, and a Facebook page, and and they spend on the media and generate leads by capturing whatever is there at the bottom of the funnel in their specific geography of this hyperlocal. And there we are seeing a good response and a good result in terms of the number of leads that we get. Okay. So which has been increasing every year, okay. Constantly. It's roughly more, in excess of 35% in terms of leads, and even the conversions we kind of monitor. So there are surrogate ways to actually look at how things are performing and what the outcomes are and the results are, and then make a judgment. So while of course the point that you made is absolutely right, that there needs to be better transparency. At the same time, I think we're trying to find some alternates and surrogates to actually judge and kind of look at the outcomes.
On that note, thank you so much, Mr. Akella. This has truly been very insightful for me and hopefully my audience. More power to the sector, which has gone through so much, and definitely more power to Maruti. We're looking at an exciting 2023, and hopefully the global slowdown, would not impact us too much. That's the prayer, but who knows how the year is going to pan out. But thank you so much. And next time we meet Mr. Akella, I'm definitely going to come in person and do this interview in one of your showrooms. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on your show, and looking forward to having a physical session the next time around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The pleasure is entirely mine. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Akella.
Thank you.